Hey everybody, welcome to Fit Tip Tuesday. Today I'm starting a new series called Troubleshooting Your Pants Fitting. I've taught a few classes over the past few weeks, my whole scoop multi-method pants fitting class. That class starts out with the basic framework of top down, center out, as described by Ruth Collins in Threads article 218. And I've noticed some consistent themes in picking sizes, prepping the pattern, the waistband, the separate single leg muslin, and the fitting process that keep occurring. So I thought what I would do is make a series of videos that I could refer my students to when I'm teaching to give them extra help on some of these issues that keep cropping up. And also, if you're not taking a class with me, I think you'll find this helpful if you're trying to fit pants and you're working with top down, center out, or a separate waistband and single leg muslin. So I'm going to be using my Sorcha Classic Slim Trouser pattern to share all this with you because that's the pattern I teach with. And I'm going to give you some really cool tips and ways to make it easier and more streamlined so you're spending less time prepping your pattern and more time fitting your pattern. All right, so let's start by looking at the size chart. The size chart on the Sorcha Classic Slim Trousers includes all the sizing for all the size groups. It's available in 3 size groups, 2 to 8, 10 to 16, and 18 to 24. So looking at this size chart, I just want to set up an example of the best starting sizes for me. And then I'm going to show you step by step how to trace your pattern. And then I'm going to talk about a few pattern adjustments you may want to make before you add the extra areas or allowances for fitting and cut out your muslin. So to start out with, my full hip is 43 inches. So I'm going to look at the chart here, and we always start with the full hip. So I'm looking down the chart. You want to find a size that's approximately 2 inches bigger than your measurement. So for me, that puts me at size 14 because the finished pant measurement in that size is 45 inches. That's 2 extra inches for ease. And then what you want to do after you select that starting size is just compare the waist and upper thigh and possibly knee measurements to your body measurements to make sure you have enough room. Now in my case, my waist and tummy measure 41 inches, between 40 41 inches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use 2 sizes, and let me explain why. If we look down to the size 16, the waist is much closer to my measurement. It doesn't need to be at my measurement because this pattern has 4 waist darts, plus we're going to be adding extra safety seam allowance. So I know if I'm within 2 inches of the pattern, I'm going to be okay. 2 or 3 inches. I think if you're more than 4 or 5 inches away or bigger than the pattern, I would go up a size. And where we're going to use that larger size is the side seam, because the side seam goes from the waist to the hem. So giving me that extra room there is going to ensure that I can fit my waist without needing to add fabric later. But then the other thing is, remember my hip is 43 inches, so I'm going to use the size 14 for my center front, center back, and inseam. And just to double check it a little bit farther, I'm going to just compare the finished upper thigh and knee measurement to make sure that I have enough ease there. So I know that my upper thigh is 25.5 inches, so that's giving me almost 2 inches at the upper thigh, and my knee is 16 inches, between 15 and 16 inches, depending on if it's bent or straight. So I know that I'll have enough ease in my knee as well. So this brings up a point. You want to be body aware. So if you know that you have certain body issues that you need to prepare for when you're fitting pants, just make a list of them. Like if you have a prominent inner thigh or a prominent knee or a larger calf. Any of these things, just jot them down, and that will help you, fine tune the size of your pattern before you cut anything out. So in my case, I'm going to use size 16 for my side seam because it's going to give me room at the waist. And then on the inseam and front and back crotch, I'm going to use the size 14 because that's more in line and agreeing with the measurements of my lower hip, upper thigh, knee, and leg in general. So having decided that, the next step is we need to trace. And I have a pattern here, and I almost think it's a good idea when you start tracing to actually highlight your size, and that way you're going to make sure that you're tracing the right line. Now, on my side seam, I'm going to be tracing what would be the 16, which is the largest size in the group. So I'm just going to highlight that like this. I'm also going to highlight the inseam. I'm going to go into the 14. So let me just show you what that's going to look like. And let me just highlight over here. And then the outer size on the side seam in the front. Now notice I'm not highlighting the center, front, and back yet, or the pocket area, because there are some things that we need to consider when we're working with the top part of the pattern, and I want to talk about that next. So the top of the side seam was a little bit of an issue. I mean, was a little bit hard for people to understand. So what I want to point out here is the Sorcha Classic Slim Trousers has a slash pocket. Now, when you're testing the fit of the muslin, you don't want to have any ventilation or air conditioning in your muslin, so we want to close the front pocket so it completes the waistline. So notice there is a blue dashed line that goes from the base of the pocket up to the waist. That is a guideline showing you how to prepare your pattern. If you're not in the largest size in the grouping, you're going to draw that line for yourself, starting at the base of the pocket that goes for your size. So just for example, if I was working with the size 12, I would just continue my side seam straight up to the waist like this. Okay, right like that. But in this case, I'm working with the size 16, so I'm going to just continue it up like this. Okay, and then I'm going to trace across the top like this. Now, here's the next thing. For fitting, you really do not need to have the cut-on fly pieces. So what you can do at your center front is just draw yourself a line from the top of the crotch all the way up to the waist that's parallel to the center front, which is the dashed line printed on the pattern, and that's where you're going to trace. Okay, so let me just highlight that so I know what I'm doing. So see how I'm just making everything pink to make it really easy to know where I'm tracing. And then I'm just going to connect the crotch curve to the inseam like that. That's where we're going to be tracing the front leg. The only other thing I want to mention here is if you have a defined waist, meaning if your waist was significantly smaller than your full hip, you can customize this pattern to help fit the waist by using the diagonal red lines here. Notice they angle in a little bit, right? See how they angle in versus straight? To create that on your pattern that you're going to be using to test your muslin, I'm just going to use a different copy here for this. So instead of drawing the parallel line that I did here, because my waist is not defined, it's very similar to my high hip or tummy measurement. So I'm going to be using this straight line here. But if it were smaller, what I would do is I would connect from the top of the front crotch. Just go ahead and draw yourself an angled line like this. Okay, and that's going to give you a little bit of a dart effect when you zip up your zipper in the end. So you want to have a little bit of an angled seam if your waistline is significantly smaller than your full hip. And I printed it over here. You can see I've got it here and here. I just didn't print it on this one as well because it got too messy looking. So you're going to want to draw that for yourself. Okay. So getting back to my example here, I've completely traced around just the size. Notice I'm not worrying about the extra that we're going to add yet. Okay. It's easier if you just trace your size first. There's one extra line in the back that you can customize the fit of your pants as well. If you have a flat butt, you're going to use the red dashed line because it's taking some of the negative space out of the inside of your pants. And if you're wondering what a flat butt looks like, here's an example of a flat butt. You can see the best way to tell if you have a flat butt or not is to look at your side view. And if you've got a round curved shape and fullness in your silhouette from your side view, you don't have a flat butt. You might have average or prominent. And in either of those cases, you're going to use the black angled center back seam. But if your butt is relatively flat and it doesn't have any significant contour looking at it from the side view, use the red dashed line instead. All right, so in my case, I don't have a flat butt, so I'm going to trace the angled center back seam, and I'm going to just connect that to my inseam like this. All right, and then I'm also going to trace my darts. Now the darts are labeled, so I am going to trace the dart that is my size, and I'm going to use the size that corresponds with the side seam. So I'm going to use the size 16 dart, or the biggest size, like this. So I'm just going to trace it so I have it. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it over here too. Okay, and it may seem like extra work to trace your pattern, but here's the thing. When you go to trace it onto another piece of paper now, it's going to make it so much easier and your eye won't get tricked by all the lines all over the pattern. So here is the next step. I'm going to take my tracing paper and let me just cut it so it's a good size for what we're doing here. All right, so now we're going to trace it, and I recommend putting 2 pins, or if you have your SewTites, you guys know that I'm in love with my SewTites. I'm going to use those instead of pins because guess what? A SewTite isn't going to get in my way or prick my finger. So basically, I just need to put one SewTite there, and then I'm going to put the other one diagonally somewhere down near the bottom. Okay, and now you can see my paper isn't going to shift or move, so I can very easily trace my front and back leg now. So the next step is to trace, and I'm just going to use my ruler on the straight parts, and I'll just use my free hand on the curves. So that's really all you need to trace on the back leg. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the front. I'm going to trace my front waist. If you use your ruler on the straight parts, you get a neater straight line. Okay, and my knee. All right, so there's the front. So let's just look at this really closely. You can see I did not trace any of the cut-on fly pieces, because when you're fitting your pants, this big rectangle of fabric just flops around and it makes it hard to see what's going on in the front. So that's why I'm not tracing that for the pattern I'm using to make my muslin. We can add this back on at the end when we're ready to cut out our pants. So that is the next step. So we've picked our size or sizes and we've traced our pattern. Okay, so I just wanted to show you in a streamlined way how to do that. I would also, just label, Sorcha size, 14, 16, and then put the date maybe, 4 to 23. And then this is the back. You might want to label. So Sorcha, size 14, 16, and the date. And that way you have a record of, when you trace this pattern. So that's my size. All right, so the next step is I'm going to turn my pattern upside down and use it as a work surface now. So notice I can look at my pattern without seeing all the lines in the braided nest. So this gives me the perfect environment to just pay attention to what I'm doing to my pattern now to finish the prep for it. So that is how you trace your pattern. Notice I haven't added any extra to the top of the waist or the side seam and possibly the inseam yet. Next week during part 2, I'm going to show you how to do that. Plus, there are a couple of adjustments you might want to make to your pattern pieces before you cut them out to help you along the way in your fitting. So join me for part 2 next week during Fit Tip Tuesday. And this Friday, I am starting a series as well with my Japanese fabric, and I'm going to make a Japanese fabric version of my Sorcha Classic Slim trousers. So join me to see my washed fabrics and my plans for using those fabrics to make a really fun pair of Sorcha Classic Slim trousers. I'm super excited. So I just want to thank you all for watching and have a lovely rest of your day.